Welcome back to season 2 of the Never Left Behind podcast, a podcast by United Valor. We're really excited about this next season. As you can see us now.
Got video.
We do have video, which is pretty awesome. So for anybody listening to this, maybe on Spotify or any of the other audio-only platforms, you can check us out on YouTube or on our website, weareunitedvalor.com. For anybody who's on YouTube that may be watching this, you can go to our audio-only podcast that is on any of the podcast platforms for season 1, which we've interviewed, I think, 20 veterans.
Yeah, 20
in season 1. So we're excited about what's to come in this next season. We're going to interview plenty more veterans, not just in the book of the 20-year war, but also veterans outside of the book, and share more of their stories and get more insight of what it's like to be a veteran.
Yeah, and I know Dan and I are both very excited. Again, we've got video going, so that was kind of the next step that we want to get, is just have it more personal for you guys to see a lot of these stories with veterans that we have. Right now, a lot of the interviews are through Zoom. I know we're in talks of doing some guest spotting with podcasts for this season, doing some on-location podcasts, but for the most part, for people that are in different states, we want to keep them just using through Zoom or doing their own video. But we are looking forward. Anybody that is looking to have any kind of sponsorships with this video, we're very open to it. I know, please bear with us. We're upgrading equipment as much as we can, and I know we're looking forward to even getting more higher quality studio settings with like different cameras and such. But I know for now we're very excited to at least announce that we have video going for season 2. And as each season rolls out, we're going to be continuing to upgrade the show, and we can't thank you guys enough for just being a huge part of season 1, for all the support, and coming into season 2. We hope that you guys will continue to follow along and help us share these untold stories of veterans from across the globe.
Yeah, and if you like this, subscribe, share, definitely leave us comments if there's specific questions you want us to ask veterans that maybe we're not asking. Let us know. We want to hear about it.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Thanks.
Real stories, real heroes, for a real cause. This is Never Left Behind, the podcast. Tom, it's great to have you. We're getting started with season 2, and we have to notice, and I think the women and men that are watching this are going to see that you don't have a beard.
What happened?
Yeah. I took one for the team, man. And actually, I guess we should probably start with me officially being part of the team, because last time you guys were like, oh, you have a great veteran story. And now you two fools are stuck with me as part of all of this.
That's
so, yeah, I don't know when the people will get to see the video that we did in order to help promote the 20-year war. Which, again, thank you guys for bringing me on as one of the writers and now officially a part of the team. But it was required to have young me versus old me, and young me required that we got back down to here. So the bald kind of tells on me, but yeah, we're rocking that fresh shave, man. I don't know how much longer, but it's there for now.
Some true followers might have seen it, the behind the scenes of you shaving off your beard and everything, just for that skit for the video for the book. But
yeah. What? But I mean, it's been several weeks. Why not let it grow back out?
So it's the heat. It's the heat and the humidity, and it's one of those where if it gets much more than a week, it starts getting that like really prickly, ugly, nasty, and I'm just not dealing with that during the summer, man. Like I will rock a 5 o'clock shadow with about 4 or 5 days worth of growth, which is essentially like a small beard for most people. But after that, it just gets that really prickly, gacky, like your face is on fire. And I just can't deal with that right now.
That's
so
why
it'll probably come back in the fall.
Mine.
Yep.
It'll come back in the fall. Meanwhile, before we went on air, if we're telling on ourselves, Dan is like, wait, hold on. I've got to fix my hair. He's wearing a hat.
Man,
like,
I'm on video now. I'm on video now. I gotta,
Dan,
tuck away the hair and everything.
Dan the Diva, ladies and gentlemen. Like,
that's our
who would have thought out of the 3 of us that he'd be the one to first go full diva? But there it was.
Hey, they say in the military, as long as you're in the right place at the right time in the right uniform, you're already 80% to success. To me, my motto was looks are 99%. If you look the part, more than likely people are going to listen.
Then why do you guys have me on video?
I think, and especially for people that might even be just listening for the first time, to give kind of an introduction. So all three of us, including Tom now, are part of a company, United Valor. We started a book called The 20-Year War. Dan is obviously our CEO. Tom is next up in line, who, bosses me around to create designs and get everything going. But I want to know, Tom, we've talked about this plenty off air, but I'm curious from people that have asked questions more about the writings and the stories in the book. I know a little bit about it, but I want to know the insanity that you went through on creating these 71 stories in the book.
Well, I mean, I think that we, now that the book is done, I think that we can tell on ourselves a little bit where we were kind of stupid. If we had gone to a major publication like Random House or Simon and Schuster and said, hey, we want to do this portrait book of 71 veterans, release it by 9/11 of this year, and we're starting in January, they all would have been like, get the fuck out, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, really, and actually, I'm going to turn this question around on you after I answer it, Bo, because I want to hear more about what you did and sort of how we synced up. But basically, I was traveling back and forth between Chicago and Omaha, Nebraska, which is where I live now. The first time we did the pod, I was in Chicago. Now I'm since here in Omaha. And so it was one of those things where I would literally get into Omaha. I was doing a sort of like the Monday through Thursday consultant thing, for the day gig. And so I'd be living out of this hotel, and it was the Embassy Suites in La Vista, Nebraska. And by the way, shouts to Sherry for the insanely, by the end of it, large, heavy pours of free Embassy Suites Cabernet to get me through everything. I'd go to work all day. I'd come back in, and by that point, you'd already uploaded the day's audio. So I would go in there like with this, basically clear solo cup of cab, and I would just be listening to the audio and typing out the stories to get them into like a working, functional sketch or draft. From there, I'd send them to Trevor, who's our editor at Ballast. Shouts to Trevor as well for putting up with me. Mm-hmm. And then, once we sort of had that, it was feeding it back to you guys to make sure that it wasn't crazy. I didn't miss anything. Then we got the veteran to approve it, and we just kept going. But, oh man, I would, you do the 9 to 5, get back, go for like a 2.5 mile treadmill run just to say that you did it. And I hate treadmills. I fucking hate them.
I hate running in general.
Like take a shower. And, then it was, I was just down at the bar. Like there's anyone who was at that La Vista Embassy Suites in like January, February, or March, I'm sure they saw me, if you remember, with the beard, and like, I was just banging away the whole time. Mm-hmm. But I mean, that was at least static. Like, what about you? I mean, 16,000 miles, 42 states. I mean, what, you went back and forth. Do I remember this right? Like 4 times across the country or something like that?
3 times.
Right.
Yeah. Florida, and about you didn't 4 times.
Yeah. And you didn't kill Dan or I? Like, I mean, talk me through that, dude.
So, I mean, the first time around was me going out by myself, which was in the heart of January. I remember it was the worst
time to go.
We talked to Mike Hall from Three Ranger Foundation, and we were telling him about this journey and the book. And he was like, you go south in the winter, you don't go north. And he's like laughing at us, like, you guys are out of your damn minds. So I remember I packed up the car, and the first place I went to was Houghton, Michigan.
Yeah. And mind you, it is a car. It's what is it? It's a Mazda.
Oh, it's a 2-wheel drive.
Yeah.
Mazda 6.
Mazda 3.
Yeah.
It's a nice car. But
it's a nice car, but not meant for heavy snow and ice.
I packed Dan's chains in the trunk just in case. And actually, surprisingly, didn't have to use them once. But I remember driving up to Michigan. I passed through. I stayed with Tom, and I took his photo. And that was the first stop. Actually, I lied. I stopped in Chicago, but the first veteran officially story that we recorded was Drew's. And that was up in Houghton, Michigan. And I remember getting up there, and it was like -8 degrees at night, which is actually not that bad for January for up there, from what I hear. That was kind of a warm spell for them. But just seeing like all the snow and the ice, and then you go from there all the way through like Wisconsin, you see the frozen Mississippi, then you get out to, all the way to California and back. And that was the first trip I did. And then it kind of speed up is when all 3 of us met, and we drove up to New York City, visited JC. Dan and I kept going to Maine, and then we came back around Ohio, back to North Carolina, where Dan and I live. Mm-hmm. And then from North Carolina, I drove to Florida like 4 times.
Yeah.
And that's not including the flights to Texas, to Washington. Like we were all over the map.
Well, I will say that one of the memories I will forever have is, so for those of you, I'm going to tell on Dan a little bit. He had never been to Times Square in New York City.
No,
and so we're on Long Island with JC, and we're JC Glick, who is a wonderful friend of ours and I had served with in the Ranger Regiment. His story is just so amazing. I can't wait for you guys to read that. But we went into the city, and Bo's been there a million times as the fashion photographer. I've been there a bunch of times, and Dan's like, I really want to go to Times Square. And Bo and I are both instantly like, no, fuck. Don't be that tourist guy, man. Come on, don't make us be these people. Please don't, right? Well, finally he's like, no, I really want to go.
Yeah.
I will make sure that I send the picture to you guys so like we can find a way to post it somewhere. But it was a graveyard.
Oh my
God.
Absolute graveyard. It was crazy.
On Sunday night at like 8 p.m. Eastern, which if you've ever been to Times Square, like non-COVID related, it's insane. Like it never stops. And what was so funny is, so Dan's like, oh, this is kind of cool. And it's totally flipped. Like it's gone. Dan's like, oh, this is kind of cool. And Bo and I are just like, what is going, like suddenly we were like, what is going on here? Like this is, never seen this before. This is crazy.
But the thing is too, is like, Tom, I think you've even been there more than I have, and you're used to like that more city nightlife, especially in Chicago, where things don't close till 4 a.m. So typically, if you're on Times Square or anywhere in New York City, you can go to pubs, you can get food at 3 in the morning, and they close at like 4. And I remember we were looking for dinner at 9, and most places were closed. It was bizarre to try and find like even like a pizza shop to get something.
So the really weird thing, but cool thing for me visiting New York was I've always wanted to visit New York City. I've always wanted to see the city, and I think everybody should probably visit at least once, but also just the connection with 9/11 and the Twin Towers and now the Freedom Tower and everything, that that was an experience in itself. But it was a bizarre but also kind of a cool time to visit New York City, and for anybody who's been there previously probably had the same feeling you guys did. That was like, man, this is crazy, this is weird. But for me, I didn't have to deal with any of the crowds or any of the chaos. And I got to just take in all the architecture, all the different sights and sounds and everything. And it wasn't like a madhouse there. So I got to, I feel like, enjoy it a lot more than I would have had I gone with large crowds. Cause I don't particularly like very large crowds.
You saw with a little bit of snow in the city, and it was really pretty out. We went to all the memorials together, and I mean that's definitely, like you said, that's enough to go and visit New York. Is standing there at the the memorial pools where the Freedom Tower is now at. That's pretty incredible to experience that.
Yeah,
or going across to New Jersey, that was a lot of fun, and just looking in and the flags and everything. Like it was great, but it was just odd. Like the city was just so shut down in February, and and then it's actually really ironic because a very good friend of mine just sent me a picture from Times Square 2 days ago, because he's in New York. He does a lot of business there, and it's opening up, and it's jammed again. It's like Carl's like obligatory Times Square selfie, and I'm laughing, and it's just like everything's just packed, and I'm like, I sent him actually back the picture I took. And sent you, Dan. I'm like, this is what it was in February. Yeah. And he was just like, he's like, that's unreal, dude.
Yeah. So, it was definitely weird. It was amazing. It was awesome, but it was just weird with how limited like people walking around it was. It was just.
And I think to even go on from the travel side to bring Dan, your side of this into it, I think what was kind of cool is I remember before we set up for this, my first road trip across America, where I spent a month driving across, I think we had maybe like 7 or 8 veterans lined up. There wasn't that many. And in my head, I was thinking like, to make this trip, not to say it's not worth it, but as far as costs and everything like that is involved, I was thinking like maybe 15 people would be great. At least in the time frame, if I'm spending a whole month on the road, we've got to get this book kind of, nailed down. And I remember, I think right when I got on the road in the first week, we had like 20 people all of a sudden come through, and then by the end of that month we had 30 people. And I remember it was this chaotic, constant phone calls with Tom and Dan every day, and it was basically like, all right, I just photographed so and so, and here's her story, I just uploaded it to the Dropbox. And then Tom would start banging away. But what was that like for you, Dan? Kind of having to navigate and talk to all these veterans and then be like, Bo, you need to go meet up with so and so tomorrow?
It was awesome, but it was definitely like orchestrating. It was it was facilitating you to make sure that you had a clear path of where to go next, and make sure that it was along your route, and trying to time everything up perfect. And it's so crazy kind of how it all worked out. And we've said this multiple times, and knock on wood, but this project, everything, I don't know what it is, like divine intervention or whatever, but everything fell into place almost perfectly every time.
Yeah.
And it was so bizarre, because I remember when I first talked to Sophie on the phone. She's one of the veterans in the book, and she has an incredible story. But when I first talked to her on the phone, I called her, and I was telling her about the book and everything we're doing and stuff. And then I was like, "Well, I know you're traveling. You're on the road. Where are you at?" And she was she was like, "I'm in Moab." And I was like, "Get out of here." I was like, "Bo is literally like 15 minutes from there right now."
Yeah.
And I was like, "All right, as soon as I hang up the phone with you, I'm going to give Bo your phone number so that he can call you to see if you guys can link up." And sure enough, that same day, or like that 15-30 minutes later, whatever it was, we're able to meet up and talk and record audio and get a photo. Granted, we had to shoot again, but just that's kind of how the entire thing worked out. Is it was always just reaching out to the next person, figuring out where along the route they are, and then just constantly going back and forth between Tom and Bo, and trying to keep progressing the book forward.
So Dan, I'm really interested, because I actually have not asked you this, but I know that I've mentioned it a couple of times. Are you getting hit up, as the other veteran, are you getting hit up by all your buddies with the basically "thanks for including me in the book" asshole speech? Because I'm not even kidding. So my roommate in college, who was an Air Force C-130 refueler, he's like, I saw your video on Fox and Friends, and that was so great. And like, I was like, I'm just going to keep riding your coattails. And that's been a joke between him and I for years. And finally he's like, but like, you could have put me in it, like my buddy Fred. And like, I must have a dozen people in my life that are like, hey, by the way, thanks for asking me. And I'm like, dude, this just like, it was the friend of a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. Like we never really, once we got one person, like, you got to meet my buddy. Like, that's how it happened. I'll get you on the next one.
Yeah.
And that's a cool thing, is we never played favorites. It was almost like who do you know, who do you recommend that we can use in this book? And that just went down the Rolodex.
What's interesting is you asked me when you were hitting the road, to answer your question first, Tom. No, I have had, I think, one or two of my vet buddies been like, you could have swung by, and I was like, yeah, that's just how it worked out. I'm sorry, but for the most part, everybody's been supportive. But yeah, to your point, when we set out for the book, obviously I served, so I have a lot of friends that also served, but we were very conscious to be like, we don't want this to be, Dan's yearbook with all of his buddies in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We wanted it to be authentic and really have a good mix of all the people that were, that have served in the last 20 years. So it was exactly that. It was, all right, we contacted somebody, they gave us a list of like three to five more people. We contacted them, and every single time we said, do you know anybody else who has a really good story? And we just kept spreading it from there. It was very, I don't know, it was very natural. It wasn't us, really stretching and pulling to try and get certain people. It just happened the way that it did.
Yeah.
I think it was also really funny, at least for me, because that's the way we did it. And it was so organic, was how everything overlapped. So Nick Palmisciano over at Diesel Jack, who was my business partner and Ranger Up, who shot the video and convinced me to go here, for those of you who are following along. One of his best friends when he was at West Point was actually Nate Self, who just has an insane story about, his time in the service and the opening phase of the war, being in 1st Ranger Battalion on Roberts Ridge and things like that. And I had no idea that we had gotten Nate in the book or anything until Bo uploads the file. And again, I'm sitting there with my, clear solo cup of Cabernet, and suddenly I'm like, Nate Self. I'm like texting Bo. I'm like, 175 Nate Self. He's like, yeah, man. I'm like, how the hell did that happen? And it's like, well, the guy to the guy to the guy. And I immediately flip over to Nick. I'm like, you're not going to believe this, but I'm doing Nate's story right now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And he's
that
like,
was
no way. And I'm like, yeah, bro. Like it was just so the intersection of all those stories and how they came together was crazy.
Yeah.
that was a hard story to hear. I remember that one pretty
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah.
And for people that
Yep.
are interested, I mean, look up Tucker Gar, look up Roberts Ridge. You'll find out all about the story,
Yeah.
or you'll read his story in the book. But yeah, I mean, it's just crazy how things
Well, Nate
line up so perfectly.
here, I'll plug his book too. Nate wrote a book, right?
You haven't?
Yeah, he wrote a book called Two Wars.
Yeah.
And and so you can read the full story in there, but it's an incredible read too, because it's from his perspective and how he's reflected back on that specific battle. So it's a great read. People should read it. But yeah,
The one thing I will say, and I think this was recently on a podcast that I was personally on, and I know both of you are going to be on as well, but it was interesting to think about how every single person's story was so different, and I wasn't expecting that at all. Like I was thinking out of 71 veterans, which is, don't ask us how we land on 71. It's just a super random number.
Yeah.
But it was like, it was kind of, I don't know. I thought going into it like, okay, I'm going to run into the same story at least like 2 or 3 times. And I think everybody's story was so unique that I was like, well, this is hard to close this at 71. I want to keep going.
Not only were the stories unique, but what I think that we did is really cool in the book is we really wanted people to pull knowledge from each veteran. We wanted somebody to gain something from each veteran. And so we were very intentional about, drawing, whether it's a life motto or what people live by or a life lesson or whatever that they've gained throughout their military experience or civilian life or whatever it is, but put that in the book in their own words. And what was crazy about that is out of all 71, there's not a single overlap. Nobody said the exact same thing. There are a few that maybe are similar and on the same vein, but they were all different. Yeah. And that to me is crazy.
Well, I think that there's a lot of threads of shared experience, right? That there's a lot of, the reasons that people chose to serve. There's a lot of similarity across 5 or 6 sort of major buckets, if you will. There's a lot of threads of similarity on how they transition, whether it was positive or negative. But everyone's journey really is, and I mean, it's true, but it was crazy. They really were their own unique thing. I mean, I think the hardest story that I had to take the audio file and turn into something was actually Sophie's, because we were talking about that because, the reason she was in Moab is she's living out of her Sprinter van. She's doing the van life thing, even though she's a extremely, extremely well-respected and extremely high-power consultant at one of the major firms, just crushing it. That's her day job, but she's touring around. And she did it to sort of like rewire some negative patterns of behavior that were in her head. And I did something similar, only I did it with a 40-liter backpack and I traveled all the way around the world. So that was, I mean, I remember, because that was the only story where I went back to Bo and I'm like, get more audio. I'm like, there's more to this. And he's like, how do you know? I'm like, I'm telling you, I just know, like, go back and ask her like these 3 or 4 questions. And it opened up and like, I got done with the first draft. And I just remember texting her being like, yo, I'm going to send this to you. I need your help with this, because I don't want my voice in it. Most of the stories were really easy, but I think that there's a lot of that overlap in the book, but no one's story is the same. There's, I can think of 3 or 4 guys where they're really similar, but they weren't the same. And I think that might be the coolest thing to me is how similar a lot of the collective experiences are, but how people interpreted those differently and how they processed it differently and what it's meant for their lives.
Yeah.
Well, I think it goes to the common vein of what we're trying to say with this book is like, it's easy for somebody to see somebody in uniform and think that they're all the same. Yeah. But the second that uniform is off, you can realize how different everybody is. But and the uniform isn't something that defined each of these people. Sure, it shaped some of the things that they've become, but it's not what defines them. They're just a human who's living on this earth just like the rest of us. Yeah. And so everybody's experience is different. And I think that's really cool. And I hope a lot of people who read, through all of these stories are going to get that. And hopefully, like we keep saying, break down those barriers of those typical stereotypes that people see.
Can we give a sneak peek story at all? Tom, I'm curious. I know this is putting you on the spot. Is there any stories in particular that just really struck a chord with you?
Oh, man. I mean, Sophie's was obvious. Just because that was so personal to me, just to see someone who was wrestling with this combination of being told that they were extremely accomplished but not feeling whole, and how they got off this high powered, career path. For me, it was entrepreneurship. For her, she ended up being able to, because of COVID, keep her consulting job, but she's like, I'm gonna go do this. That one really, really hit home with me. I think honestly, because I wrote the stories, I don't know, and I just listened to them over and over and over again. I don't want to say that I became numb to some of them. It's just that as the writing and hearing the theme and all that, to me, it was way more about the pictures, because I got the audio right away, and I was, some of these stories I spent hours on. So I guess I would flip it around and say, what stories impacted you guys because you didn't work with them the way that I did? And what I would say for me is, I'll give you some of the pictures that I just went, because the first time I saw most of these, and you got, and Dan and Bo know this, but just for the audience, was when we started putting them all on the wall to figure out how we were going to adjust the book. That's when I first saw them. And the one that jumped out right away to me was David Prince's. And I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think I said something to Bo, like, oh, well, I guess you really don't suck at this or something like this. And we started laughing about it. But like, everything you need to know about that guy is in that picture. I mean, that picture is just powerful.
It's him literally, like it's stained all over that photo. Like, and we met at the National Veterans Memorial and Museum in Ohio. I remember taking his photo outside of the museum, and he was just outside taking a cigarette break. And he was like, well, where do you want me to stand? And he was like, just inhaling a drag at the second and then exhaling through his nose. And I just snapped it right there. And I was like, he's like, well, you took a photo? I was like, yeah, we're good. And he was like, well, that's all you need. And I'm like, yeah, I saw the moment. Like, I want to catch you off guard. And it was such a real moment.
Tanya Oxendines is also another one where it's just like, everything you need to know about that woman is in that photo. Like her story of perseverance and her story of overcoming is incredible. But it's like there. And then the one that for me is deeply, deeply personal, because he has been a friend of mine for a long time. You really caught Tim Kennedy and who Tim is. That was a cool moment. There's a lot of sort of, I mean, he's a very high profile actor, entrepreneur, all this other stuff. So Tim knows how to take a photo. You know what I'm saying? Like, he knows what angle looks right and how to smile. And Nate Boyer is the same way. Like, they've done some of that, model shoot stuff. And Tim's, I'm like, oh yeah, that's my friend. That's what jumped out at me, is that little smile. Justin Lakens was the same way. Just because, again, I knew those guys. But then even the ones that I didn't, like, I loved the sisters. I thought that was Christine and Katie. I thought that was such a great photo. One's in uniform, one's not. It was just so. You got to, at least for me, you got a great sense of their relationship. So I'll flip it around to both of you guys. Like, what either stories or pictures really resonated with you?
Well, for me, what was really cool is I do know several people in this book, but I learned something new about every single one of them. And it was interesting to me to hear their stories, especially getting into the details of something that I hadn't heard before. And a perfect example is Jordan and Drew, two brothers who served different units, but during the same time. And it was crazy, because I remember Jordan going through the experiences of when his brother got injured overseas, but he never told me all the details of everything that happened. Right. So like, getting him to tell that story was just insane. And I think he had even not really processed and reflected on that entire experience until we started asking him more and more about, finer details of what happened. So I think that is what was, to me, the coolest part of all these stories. And those are the ones that, like, I'm going to keep pulling back to. But all the ones that you've already said, Tanya's is incredible, and David Prince's photo is crazy. One that you didn't talk about is Joe Cerna's. He's, man, talk about literally an indestructible person. Cheated death multiple times, and still still was in the fight and still wanted to continue to deploy. But he's the most loving person. Like, you talk to him and meet him face to face, and he's the most loving person. But then his portrait too is just powerful. You could tell that he's been through a lot of shit. Like you could tell he's seen a lot of combat. But again, at the other side of it, you can tell he's an approachable person that you can talk to.
Yeah.
And that's exactly who he is. And so I just think those messages and those stories are really what are powerful to me.
Yeah. And I think the cool thing from my perspective, and not to give too much details away, but I think that, even for me, it was like Aaron Lurich, who I met up with. And I remember just meeting up with him and hearing about his story of, battling his wife's kind of medical condition and his drug abuse while he was in the military, and just where his life has taken him since. That was one that really stood out to me. But there were so many. And I remember the funny thing, and I remember going back to the beginning of this book, we talked about how we didn't want to just focus on too many like the bigger, like quote unquote celebrity veterans. I think this book was more important about telling the untold stories of veterans that nobody has maybe heard of before. But we do have, I feel like, a few handpicked ones. And I remember two stories, I think, real quick. The funny thing is, I think I was just sitting on the couch with Dan one night, and I direct messaged Tim Kennedy and Vince Vargas. And
it was the night before we went on our. It was the night before we went on our trip.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the night before we went on our trip, all three of us.
I'll wear this L. Go ahead.
Well, I think no, it's not even an L for you, because I think I initially asked you, and I think you reached out to them. And
no. Let me tell how it is.
I mean, no. All right. So I'll tell the Vince part of it. So like for Tim, I was just, again, him being a very good friend of mine, I was honestly a little reticent. I don't. Yeah. It's very important for me to not ever feel like my quote unquote famous friends feel like I'm treading on their name or treading on their fame. So the fact that Bo just did it and he was so excited, I'm like, this is great. But Vince, I had the wrong phone number on my phone. Like I didn't update my phone number for him. So I'm texting this dead phone number and he's not getting back to me. And I'm getting pissed. I'm like, what the fuck, man? Like, this is like, at least tell me to play hide and go fuck with myself, dude. Like, no harm, no foul on that. But like, whatevs. And then you like hit him up on IG, instantly responds. And then it's like, you send me the phone number and I realize it's not the right number. Yeah. Right. Yep. And I'm like, God damn it. So I used the right phone number and I am not, hand of God, I swear on my combat scroll, within a minute. He's like, sup, bro? Like, let's catch up. And I'm just like,
you're like, thank God.
This is going to suck. Yeah. It's never going to let me live this one down.
The funny thing about that, in my perspective, is I was just, I don't know much about the veteran space. I know a little bit more now, but back then I was just like, okay, I can see these guys have a lot of followers. They're a big deal in that community. And I remember I just like direct messaged Tim and Vince, and they both replied in like 5 minutes. Yeah. And we're like, sure, shoot me an email. And I was like, what? And then I was like, kind of like stunned for a second. And then going forward, when we decided to meet up with Tim and Justin, and I remember, I think it was Dan who got the invite to grapple and work out with Tim. And then Tom was like, good luck. You guys are going to die.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That was a fun little Twitter war between Dan, Nick, Parmigiano, a couple other people jumped in, and myself, because there are black belts and then there are black belts. Tim is definitely the second when he decides to turn it up to 11.
Well,
I want to hear your side of it, because obviously you and I were at the gym together, but I remember you were working out and it was like just winded,
dying. I was literally dying. But no, what was crazy about it too is, so when you first sent that email out to Tim, I remember I randomly got a phone call and I didn't realize it was Tim Kennedy on the other line immediately, because he was like, hey, how's it going? And I recognized the voice, but I was like, good. He was like, is this Dan Blakely? I was like, yeah. And he was like, oh, this is Tim Kennedy. And I was like, what? Why did he call me? I didn't like, I legitimately didn't know why he called me at first, because yes, both of our phone numbers were in the email, but yours, I mean, you sent the email, but he just called me out of the blue. And then, so we started talking. I told him about the book and what we're doing and everything. He got super stoked. And then he was like, well, if you guys are coming out, come work out with us. And we're going to go to my local gym. Mm-hmm. And then we didn't end up going to the local gym, right? We ended up going into Roca's facility where they have an incredible workout space. And we're working out with just a bunch of beasts, and I'm dying. I'm just dead. And then not only that, Tim was like, oh yeah, by the way, like after the workout, he's like, oh yeah, by the way, we're not going to go to the Gracie gym. We're going to work out here and do some Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And we're going to have 5 black belts and all world champions. And I'm like,
yeah, I was gonna say, not
what?
5 black belts, 5 world champion
Yeah.
black belts. Ribeiro was in there, like that. If you're on the jiu-jitsu scene like I've been, Dan sent me a picture, and I'm like, you understand that you're in a room full of great, like the lowest ranking brown belt in that room's a world champion at the brown belt level. Like that was a room full of sharks.
Young kid, and forgive me, I forgot his name, but he was a young kid from Brazil who was like,
is that Javier? I think that was
it might have been. But, so, and I don't know shit about Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I don't know anything about that industry. So I remember when I was in there, I just thought these were just guys that were rolling around.
Yeah.
And like, I was just going up like, hey, nice to meet you. Like, I'm the photographer. And they were like, oh, that's a cool project you're working on. And
they're the nicest people in the world.
Taking photos with me and all that. And then I think like when we left, we had that group photo. And I think Tom was like, you need to look up those people that's in that group photo. And I started researching and looking at their Instagram. And I'm like, 1 million followers, 700,000 followers, world champion this. And I'm like, what the fuck, dude? There's a lot of big people in that room.
Dude, it was a bizarre experience, but you know what, the coolest thing for me was just that experience and the one-on-ones we were able to have with Justin and Tim. Like everything that you see, and this goes back again to our common theme, everything that you see or read about a person, like if it has some sort of intent behind it, you don't see the person for who they are.
Yeah.
But when it's really them and it's just them in their raw moment, like it's truly authentic. And I think that's why we were able to have those deeper conversations with each of these veterans. And I think that's why Tim opened up a little bit more about, than his normal podcast interview or than his normal, magazine interview or whatever. And so it was an amazing experience.
He put some deep stuff in his story that I have never even heard of from him.
I literally called Justin. Oh, I mean, I texted you guys, but then I called Justin. I'm like, can I actually write this down? Like, this, like, because there was a lot of stories that I had heard for years we don't talk about this. I mean, not public, like there's nothing bad. It's just, and I don't want to give this impression like there's some deep, dark voodoo to this. It's just, before Tim grew up, he has 2 daughters that are very, very close in age, like, which he's talking about in this. And like, I mean, of course, obviously, like I've met both of them actually, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, for me, I'm like, we just never talked about that publicly. Right. Like, and I'm like, what, and then he's talking about some of the stuff that he did overseas, which again, I had known, and that's war, that's combat. But I'm like, like what, I know the guy that's actually doing his memoir, and I'm like, I'm calling him too. I'm like, yo, like, is he putting this down here too? And he's like, yeah, no, he's going to do it. It's like, you're not stepping on anything, but I'm just like, that was insane. And then again, because I know Justin a little bit, like, it's not he's my boy, but like I know Justin a little bit too, and like Justin was just so honest and just so authentic, and it was it's funny because that's not the coolest sort of story or the coolest pairing to me. That'll be the Thetfords, the father and Bill Thetford, and then Andrew, his father and son. To me, that's just like the coolest because they have their story about actually going out on mission together, which I just thought was just so amazing. But there's something that for me that will always be super special for seeing someone who I consider a good friend and then someone I consider a friend being, these sort of, brothers by service, and eventually now they are actually in-laws because they're married to sisters. Yeah. So that was just so cool to me. I mean, and that's something I will truly treasure.
It's just crazy that you have, you've got sisters, you've got 2 brothers that have served together. You've got a husband and wife that served together, which is, that's unreal.
Yeah. Father and son. You just talk about
father and son. It's like, you've got so much just diversity, I feel like. And I didn't think we'd have that much going into it, to be honest. Like, I'm going to be real when I say, when we started thinking about this book, I think I started thinking of it totally different in the beginning phases, as I was like, oh, I'm just going to take portraits and like back then, like I was like kind of writing the stories, and I'm not a writer by all means, as you guys would know. And I remember like, bad. This book could fucking
there were some edits. There was some editorial cleanup that needed to happen for a couple of these.
And I remember just looking at it a different way. And as we started getting the ball rolling, and like Tom joined in, and and obviously put these stories in first person. I think I want to imagine for you, that was the hardest part, because I don't think we had many veterans that came back and said, can we like completely change this? We maybe had a couple, but the unique thing was, how was that for you? Like having to keep it all in first person.
Well, yeah.
Well, I mean, I actually remember that was one of the things that I saw it. Our editor, actually, Trevor, is in Chicago. So when I was still there and I was transitioning, we sat down and he's like, I think we should do this in third person. Like, no, we're absolutely going to do this first.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And he's like, why? And I'm like, because it's their story.
Yeah.
I'm not writing for me, I'm writing for them. And if I'm writing for them, then I need to tell their story, not my interpretation of it, which that was probably the hardest part, right? Because you get this audio file that's 15 to 40 minutes, depending on what you're doing. And you're trying to get it anywhere from 350 to 1200 words.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's hard.
So you already have to have this level of editorialism for brevity, right?
Mhm.
And, you know, and just coherence and things like that. So that was the first real challenge to it. And then the second one is you start getting into these stories that you can write 3,000 words on. You can, I mean, I can write, Tanya Oxendine can write a memoir if she wants to.
Totally.
No doubt, Joe Cerna could write a memoir, right? Steve Forty, who I loved his story and I love his insights and I love everything about him. Like, we were still in the 11th hour. Like, that was the final one that was good to go, just because like I remember we're sitting there in Raleigh and we're like, dude, like, we want this, but we have to cut 200 words or so just to get all of this to fit, or we're going to have to put like another, 20 pages in the book. Like, and we can't do that. Right. We just couldn't find a way to make it all work. And he was super cool, like, he understood, but it was still like, I could have written 5,000 words on that guy, like, I mean, there was so much long form piece, or even people that I didn't think, like, I remember, Nikki Selby had like a 9-minute interview. Yeah. And I remember going back to Bo being like, dude, just looking at the file size, I don't know if this is going to be enough. Like, we might need to like go get more. And like, excuse me, I get done with the first draft and it's 450 words.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, Trevor, here, you know what I'm saying? Here you go. And like, it all came down. So it wasn't the first person that for me was sort of the table stakes, because I felt like I was the conduit to them,
Yeah.
Well, speaking it
was definitely that.
Yeah. And speaking of, not sorry to cut you off, speaking of, Steve's story that you're working on, he's actually on the next episode that we're going to be doing, but he's got a really cool story. So obviously people can read about it in the book, but if they want to listen to the full version that you listen to and even more, they can hear on the next episode.
Yeah.
No, he's an insane guy. He's also really good friends with JC Glick, who again I served with, and JC. I think that was probably the most fun I had, if I'm being honest, because I had not seen JC in a long time. I had not seen JC in years, and now we're sitting there with his now wife. By the way, congratulations, my brother. He sent all three of us a bunch of pictures because he had just recently gotten married to a wonderful, wonderful woman. So congratulations, my guy. And like, we're sitting there and we're just getting hammered. I mean, like, he heavy poured I
brought the poison. I brought the Cital from Desert Door.
Yeah.
And man, we went through like 2 or 3 bottles of that.
He pours 4 fingers. Like, go ahead, Dan, back me up here. Like,
what was hilarious is I even told him, I was like, hey, I'm driving, so don't pour that much. He was like, all right, no problem. And he's just like, glove, 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 glove in my glass. I'm like, all right, I guess I'm going to be here a while.
Yeah, right. And we were there all night, but it's like, by the end of it, we're done. I have not been that drunk in so long, I couldn't tell you when. Like, I am stumbling back. I woke up the next morning with that hangover, right? I'm not even gonna pretend. And then, but it's like, we're but it was like, we were like, it was one part like him and I catching up and just like talking shit and telling stories, and then another part like him talking about his experience and his life journey and how he got there and stuff. And like, that one was just so much fun to like catch back up with a Ranger buddy, but also be with, like Dan and I have been Ranger buddies. We served together. Like, Bo and I, at that point, you and I had become pretty good friends. So it was like being in this room with 3 of my friends and, one of my buddies, significant others, and just hanging out and talking shit and drunk off my ass. Like, it was a good time.
Yeah. And I know people have heard it before, and we woke up the next morning and did a cold plunge in the Atlantic.
Oh God. Yeah. That was probably the best call.
How that happened, Bo.
I guess so. A lot of people have heard this story. A lot of people that haven't is I remember. So yeah, obviously all night drinking. Dan and I think, were pretty good. I was buzzed. Tom was definitely like teeter-tottering through the hallway of the hotel, like bouncing off the walls, trying to stay up straight. And I remember I think right before we left, I was asking JC because he was mentioning that they do a recent cold plunge where they jump in the Atlantic Ocean in the middle of winter. And he said that they just did it at the beginning of the year. And this was like a couple weeks prior to us being there.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, that sounds fun. I was telling Dan that I kind of want to do that like on our trip, like jump in like a frozen lake or something. And JC was like, all right, well, let's do it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, cool. Well, we'll call you up at like 7 a.m. and we'll go do it. And I remember, I think
none of us think he's actually going to follow up on this.
No.
For those of you scoring at home, none of us do.
And so in my mind, I'm like, once I say I'm doing something, I'm like, I want to do it. Like, it'll be fun. But I remember the next morning, even I was tired waking up, and I was like, I think it'll help us. Let's grab some breakfast real quick at the hotel and go meet up with JC and do it. And I remember everyone was like, damn it, Bo, like now that you're doing it, we all have to do it.
Right. So to refresh this, you have 3 multi-combat tour Army Rangers staring at the non-veteran photographer art kid with death in their eyes because he's the one that wants to go do the insane shit.
Yeah.
And he got it. He got us going, and we all went in. Which actually, as a side note, my green shorts, like my favorite pair of shorts in the world. If you could please make sure that I get those back the next time I come see you in Raleigh, because I left them in your car, Dan, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
I was wondering whose shorts those were.
Those are mine. It just popped into my head. I forgot about it because they were like wet and I'm like freezing, and yeah. So if I could have those back, that would be great.
But I think that's just one of the fun memories of creating this book, and there's so many more. I mean, there's ones I wish I could have shared with both of you while I was on the road. I mean, like you mentioned earlier, you've got portraits in there, like Nate Boyer's got like that blue steel, like total look, like body sideways, head turned, like cocked, looking at me down like this narrow hallway in Los Angeles. And I don't know, to me, that moment spoke to me, and there's just some really cool moments.
Well, I'm interested in you telling the story of the very first 2 veterans you interviewed. I remember you calling me from the road.
I got emotional during that time too. So the very first 2 was Roy Bell and Josh Grimm, and people will read about them in the book. And they both live in Virginia, and they were among the first. They were the first 2 veterans, I believe, besides Jessica Harris, who I flew out to Washington. She was the first. They were the second and third. I remember driving from North Carolina to Virginia, and I photographed them, recorded their stories, just had a great time. And I remember pulling over on the side of the road, and I was kind of getting, teary-eyed. I was kind of like, man, like this is kind of some heavy stuff. I didn't think that I would be hearing some of these things.
Well, just where you took the photo at too, though, was probably what was the heavy part.
Yeah. So even to go back, I guess, with Roy's photos, we met at his friend's grave plot, where his friend that he served with was killed in action, and that guy's father came and visited his son's plot as well. So I remember I was there with Roy and his best friend's father, who was there, and just seeing them hug and exchange tears and all that. And then going from there to Josh Grimm's house and meeting him and his wife and taking his photo, while he's doing some landscaping, like cutting down trees with a chainsaw. And that was a pretty cool moment. But I remember calling Dan up and being like, hey, I feel like even though we're only 3 veterans into this thing, I can't stop. Like, please, whatever I do not let me stop this project, because I'm going to feel like even though there's only 3, I don't want to let these people down. Yeah. Like, they've obviously let me into their homes and shared a moment with me, and I'm a complete stranger for them to tell their story to. But it was just so impactful that I didn't want to stop.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing when somebody shares, an intimate details, really, like a story that they haven't told somebody else, or a story they rarely tell other people. And it's just one of those things that you don't really feel the gravity of it until after. Yeah. Like, it's a weird thing where you reflect back on what they just told you after the fact. that you don't really like feel that emotional rush or whatever until the interview's over. And then you're like, wow, I cannot believe they told me that. Like that is so incredibly powerful. And
that happened more often than you'll know.
Yeah.
Well, I think I think what's so interesting about the project is that we're really trying to capture stories. Phil got back from being deployed in December of 2020.
Yeah.
We've got vets that literally, all right, we're going to start this, we're going to do this, and they had just gotten home.
Yeah.
Some of them, and some of them, like me, the last combat tour I had was 2004. So there's this, it really does capture the span of the war. And I think that the global war on terror, and I think that it's one of those things where it's like, it's interesting to see how people are at various stages of reflection, but they're all sort of in the same ballpark, I guess is what I would say. Like no one was really like, I didn't read any of those stories and go, where's this coming from? There was a certain, again, 71 different roads, 71 different journeys, 71 different sort of major themes, but they all really were very closely intertwined at certain levels. It was all different bits and pieces of everyone's stories that sort of weave this tapestry of community, even though how they got there and what they did is so unique. It's incredible. And I'm excited because I feel like unlike World War II, unlike Korea, unlike Vietnam, we're starting to tell these stories, not quite in real time, but pretty close.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested to see how, just as Americans, especially with the political climate the way that it is right now, right? For fuck's sake, how some of these stories land as we go forward, because we're trying to tell our truths in real time, which is not something that has happened historically. There's always been a level of sort of rose-colored glass to it, whether positively in Vietnam or in a World War II or Korea, or sort of negatively, and we're never going to do that again in Vietnam, right? So I think that's one of the things that's really been very cool about this is to see how excited the individual veterans are, and how closely they're sort of intertwined. Like, I don't know if you guys saw it, but on social media, Phil's company, Live American Yogi, and Kobe's company, Uncanna, partnered and are doing a bunch of things to like promote health and well-being and yoga and CBD and all this other stuff. And I'm like just spamming that's so cool. I love it. Like, and I love it not because they were in the book at all. I love it because it's like I was introduced to some of them through the book, and I follow them because I now have an even larger stake in their lives because I want to see them succeed, and just to see them that is so fucking cool, right? Phil this weekend was doing a cool story yoga on the Yorktown, in Wilmington, and I was like, I wish I still lived in North Carolina. I would have been out there, like let's go. It's just so cool to me. It's so fucking cool.
His story with his yoga journey is just, it's kind of funny how he describes that. He's like, on a fob, and he's like, do I do yoga in front of all these other guys? He's like, yeah, fuck it. I'm gonna do whatever I want to do. I'm at the point now where it helps me. And he started a pretty successful business doing what he does. And Dan, I think this is probably exciting. It's exciting for all three of us, but I think more so you, because you've been in more contact with them. But we should talk about where this book is going and some of the partnerships and events that we have coming up with it.
Yeah, boss. Clue everybody in.
Yeah. So, so very early on when we started being in contact, Tom sent a blank email to Bill Butler.
Are you just gonna punk me out on everything? Like, forget all the good things that I did. Forget all of the
No. Let me preempt it. Tom was so excited about the project that he forgot to put a subject line in an email to Bill Butler, who's the chief of staff to Lieutenant General Mike Farrader, who runs the National Veterans Memorial Museum up in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah.
So we got in contact with him through that, and that's where Bo really made his first stop and interviewed a few veterans there, but then also got Bill and General Farrader involved in the book as well. And while he was there, just having the initial conversation, and it was like, well, going through the museum and seeing some of the work that they've done, it almost seemed like a natural fit. That it was just kind of natural that our book had some sort of tie to the museum. So
And that museum is beautiful.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
It's brand new. It's maybe been there for 2 years. It's
Well,
like a
it's
$60 million building.
Yeah, I mean the architecture is amazing, and the way that they built it out, like that storyline as you go through, because it's almost in a interlocking rings, so two circles that are kind of off canter, and it's like two interlocking rings,
I believe.
Yeah, and but you go through it as a circle, and it's a storytelling. So you go through it and go through the journey of what it's like to be a service member, and it's through all different phases of combat, all different wars and things like that. But it's just telling the veteran story. So again, it kind of just made sense. So we just kept having conversations, and we are going to launch our book on 9/11, the evening of 9/11, at the National Veterans Memorial Museum. So we're incredibly excited about it. We're hoping to get as many of the veterans that are in the book out to the event as well. It'll be, partially open to the public as well. So there's going to be more details to come in the next several weeks. So people can look forward to it, but we're just excited to share it, because it's not just about the book and the veterans that are in the story, but it's really a reflection of what has happened over the last 20 years. And to have that tie to 9/11, which was the pivotal event that launched us into America's longest war. And just to be able to remember, that day 20 years ago, and remember the people that passed, the heroes that were there at the sites that, were trying to recover as many people as they could and save lives that day. But then also share these stories of the veterans who were able to, just carry on a legacy of service after 9/11 and serve over the last 20 years and not stop when they took their uniform off, but now continue to serve in their companies and their communities and things like that. And so the fact that we're able to go to the National Veterans Memorial Museum, share their stories, launch the book there, have a meaningful event for everybody involved, and just really hope that people feel a connection to these past 20 years, the veterans in the book, and all veterans that are not in the book as well, to really just open the door to more sharing of stories and knowledge and experiences.
Well, and that's, I think, what's so exciting to me is that the book that we put together is just a snapshot. It's 71 out of 3.5 million.
Yeah.
Which will really bake your noodle when you think about it. And so to me, I mean, first of all, the NVMM has been so supportive and it's just so incredible, and has made so many recommendations, and we're so appreciative to them. So Bill and Mike, thank you very, very much. Truly. I think it's also going to be just this, nice moment of reflection, and this, and I hope that as many vets as can come will. And, it was such a natural fit, and it made so much sense that when they're like, "Hey, how do you guys feel about this?" And we're all like, "Well, yeah," and it was funny because we were, when we had that final meeting with them to greenlight it, like, well, what do you think about the public being there? I'm like, well, yeah, like absolutely, the public should be there. This is everybody. 9/11. The weird thing I think about it is that it's actually everybody's story, right?
Yeah.
You remember where you were if you're, older than, call it, I mean, really, if you're older than 25, you remember exactly where you were.
Yeah.
Right. If you're a little younger, it gets a little hazy, but, and even the ripple effects of all of that. And, like me, I'm a pre 9/11 guy. I enlisted in 1999. Dan, you're a post 9/11 guy.
Yeah.
Like even that, there's some differences to it, and the calculus of what you choose to do. So the ability to reflect on that time and also honor those who chose to step up and continue to, and some who made the ultimate sacrifice. I'm really excited to be able to have that moment and just hang out. Like, I'm also excited that so many of these vets are going to be there, so I get to like hang out. Like, dude, I wrote your story, because I know most of my, that aren't my friends. I just got their audio files. Like, you're awesome.
Yeah.
So
it'll be fun for me too to catch up with all these people and be like, just kind of reminisce on the moment, taking their photo. And I think it'll be neat because obviously for the people that can't make it, I think we're going to do our best to have like video and content to share. We'll have news teams there that'll probably talk about even the event, but it'll be a nice, I hate to say the word celebration, but almost just a nice time with people to reminisce on the past 20 years.
It's a remembrance of the last 20 years, but it has to be a certain level of celebration, because if you can't celebrate, what has come out of something so negative, then what's the
Yeah.
point of continuing? You know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
you have to celebrate the successes, and you have to celebrate what the future holds, because these are 71 examples of really what veterans could strive to be. You know what I mean? What they should
Yes.
strive to be in a lot of situations. And
Yeah.
so you have to celebrate that. And then also to bring in the public and people who hopefully, you know, didn't serve, to just be that cruxus of how to educate and get them more involved with veterans, and how to, you know, open up and have those conversations. And I think that's the most important part. And that's why it's critically important that we have the public there.
I agree.
But yeah, to your point, Bo, I think it'll be very interesting, because you've met every single one of the veterans because you took their portrait.
Right.
Tom's met none of, well,
no, he's met
80
a fraction of them.
or 25% of them, maybe, probably about 25%.
I'd have to go back to look, probably something like close to that.
Same with you.
And then same with me. And then so it'll be really interesting for us to be there, especially Tom, to be like, I wrote your story. And then for me to be like, I didn't do anything, but you know, I'm here. No, I'm just kidding. But to be like, I was the guy in the background who was orchestrating all this stuff and trying to get it to all come together and make this happen.
Right.
But it's incredible to finally put a person, a physical person in front of me, to like shake their hand and say, thank you for sharing your story.
Which, as much as I love Steve Forty's, so Steve Forty had a line where he's like, I swear to God, if one more veteran goes into the workforce to try and be a project manager, I'm going to shoot something. Right. And what's so funny is that Dan really was the ultimate project manager of this. Like, this doesn't get anywhere near what it was without him. So, but it's like, so as much as he busts on me for being so excited that I sent a no subject line email, or, you know, all the other jackass things that I do, you know, he is the most cliche, stereotyped NCO by his project management background that you can have. So, you know, love you, buddy, mean it. But
hey man, I run a tight ship.
Diva Dan.
Yeah, I run a tight ship around here. All right, you guys got to listen and shape up.
Yeah, pretty much. The fun thing too is anyone who's in the Ranger community will be at Ranger Rendezvous.
Oh yes,
coming up. So we will be there. Obviously, that event is for the Rangers, but we will be there to be supporting it and go around and meet people, and anybody that already knows about the book that wants to come and meet up and hang out.
Well, and I mean, we didn't do this on purpose, but it was just especially because it's Dan and I's networks. I mean, we have 16 guys that served in the Ranger Regiment at some point in the book.
Yeah.
You know, whether they made their career there or, you know, they had to stop off as an officer or whatever. So it's certainly an interesting and solid celebration of the community. You know, I feel bad for, you know, all the third bat guys that are gonna try and tell us how great Fort Benning, Georgia is, because fun fact, having served there at regimental headquarters, it's still not, boys. Sorry. You know, but you know, so that'll be cool.
It'll be a fun event. We'll be there for 2 to 3 days.
Yeah, I think we'll be there the first several days, and just, you know, just hanging out really, and you know, if people want to share their stories and we can do something more, you know, we obviously have this podcast that's going to keep going. We also have potentials of what we want to do moving forward. But you know, we're excited for what the future is, and to just keep on, you know, supporting events like Ranger Rendezvous and really any others. I think we're talking about potentially going to Vet Expo as well in October. So you know, there's a lot of things that we want to continue to, again, tell stories. And to Tom's point earlier when he asked me, like, yeah, we only got 71 veterans in this book, but we're not stopping at 71. No. You know, we're going to continue to share stories. We're going to continue to make sure that people hear, you know, veteran stories. And it's not because we think all veterans are great and amazing people, but it's unique experiences that if we don't get them recorded or on paper now, they're going to get lost, like all the generations past. And so we have to get these, you know, documented, archived, whatever we got to do.
So any future partners out there, obviously, like Dan said, is we want to keep telling the stories, keep doing journals on them. You know, I want to keep taking photos, even do like, you know, short-term documentary kind of work. And obviously find the right partnerships, the right people that want to get involved to help share the untold stories. Like Dan said, it doesn't stop at the book, but that is the first project that we have worked on. And I know all three of us are equally as excited to see this thing come to fruition, even from like the news networks we've already been on. We have a lot more to come, and that's kind of what this first episode we want to do is help share more of that with you guys, share a lot of the behind the curtain scenes, even though we don't want to reveal too much, but there's still a lot more to come too.
Yeah, this journey is just beginning, and I think that's the most fun about it, is that as blessed as we've all been for this project, for the book to come together, the ability to have a positive impact on the community and the space, and to continue to tell these untold stories. I'm so excited. Like, I'm not even going to throw some of the names out there that I know that we're going to try to talk to down at Ranger Rendezvous, a couple of whom are friends of mine, just because, but I know how great their stories are. I know how, like, you have no idea who these names are, but until you start listening, oh my God, like, that's so awesome. Right.
Yeah.
The guys at Vet Expo are the same way. And, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a good ride.
Of people that, endorse the book.
Yeah.
Excited about this project. Boy. I know we're excited to share that and to show people that just how many like generals and bigger military officials got involved in it.
It's not even that. I think that for me, at least, like, names are cool and fun and all of that, but General Votel wrote the foreword, and I served under him on staff. So for me, it was like, and then he eventually becomes the CENTCOM commander. So, he's got plenty on his plate. Doesn't need to do that. Then General Craig Nixon, who was actually in Somalia, by the way, at the Battle of the Black Sea, and then eventually became the commander of the 75th Ranger Regiment, was the other commander when I was working on staff that I served under.
Yeah.
When I actually deployed overseas in 2004 with him. He got out as a 1-star and ended up becoming the CEO of Academy, which was the name change to Blackwater. So it's like he's been around this forever. Again, super busy guy, can do pretty much whatever he wants. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm in. Am I spoiling alert if I say the next big name that happens to be a 4-star that everyone in America knows?
Does it start with a P?
Yeah, it starts with a P.
Yeah, you can say it.
David Petraeus is like, JC Glick, the man who's got a relationship with him. He's like, sir, you should check this out. And he's like, hell yeah. And I'm like, wait, what? It's really not that they're these big names. I don't care that they're big names for me personally. I care that these are people that I served under and served in period of times that I respect. Right? I could care less if, Mr. Biggie McBig Britches or something like that, like whatevs, there's certainly some generals out there that like, I would love to support your book. I'm like, you can go fuck yourself. Yeah. But like all of these people that I have so much respect for, they're like, yes, we want to be a part of this. And I'm like, still looking around. Like, it's the John Travolta gif from Pulp Fiction where I'm like,
yeah,
it's just blowing my mind.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's been super interesting. And for somebody who's not a veteran like Bo, like you and I keep reflecting. And I think the people that are veterans and read the names that are endorsing this book, they're going to be like, holy shit. But like to your point, it's not the fact that it's the name of the person, but it was their ties to it. Like, they were all top commanders and sergeant majors at, during some point in the last 20 years.
Right.
And so they have a connection to all these veterans in some way, and they understand the gravity and the importance of this book. So it was really cool to see their enthusiasm to endorse this book. And then also the words that they ended up, giving us, just is powerful. I mean, you can't say anything more than it's just powerful with what they said.
Well, as we begin to wrap up this episode, obviously we want to start the first episode of season 2 to kind of keep everybody updated. Tom, from your perspective, and even Dan, is there anything left that you guys want to say, or maybe your favorite moment of creating this book, or just things that people can look forward to?
Just really excited to put it out in the world finally and let all of you enjoy it. That's where I'm at. I am, it's been fun. I'm so anxious and so excited to have it come out and have it finally in people's hands. Right.
Yeah.
And also I want to, like, the pre-order support that we've gotten at 20yearwar.com so far has been amazing. Like that, I guess maybe that might be my funnest moment so far, is our printer or our publisher being like, yeah. And suddenly he's like, I'm like, bro, you don't know who you're dealing with right now. Like we're coming to let everybody know about it.
Yeah.
But we can scream until we're blue in the face, but if it doesn't resonate with people, it's not gonna be seen, and it's resonating with people, and we just appreciate that so much. So thank you.
Yeah. I think for me, it's, I've learned so much and gained so much just from reading these stories and listening to these stories that I think that's the most important for me is just, I hope people learn and gain some new knowledge, something that they've never heard before, they never thought of before, or maybe they're remembering and reminded by, the veterans that are telling their stories. And that's what I hope people get, is just to grow really from reading these stories.
Yeah. And I think from my perspective is I'm just thankful to all the veterans that allowed me to take their photo.
Yeah.
That were the initial start of this amazing project, that agreed to meet up and take time out of their day. And I know we're truly honored to share their story authentically to the public. And I know from all three of us, we're excited to share more of these podcasts, to talk more on having more veterans, not only from the book, but other veterans aside from the book, come on and share their story. And we want to get this started with Tom. And Tom, thanks for just taking the time to hop on and get this thing started and share more of your insight behind it.
Yeah, man. No, I mean, I'm super excited. I'm glad that I'm part of the team, and it's onward and upward from here, boys. So I'm glad that we got a chance to sort of chop it up and update everybody on where we are and where it's going. And this is going to be super exciting.
Yeah.
One final thing that I'll say that I don't think we said, Tom plugged it briefly, but just to remind people can order the book now at 20yearwar.com, and it'll be in your hands earlier than the general public, looking at shipping books the end of August for anybody who pre-orders.
Yeah. So there's multiple editions of the book. There's limited ones that come with just different options. So it's more personal to what you guys want. But like you said, 20yearwar.com has more details on there. And just thanks for listening in, and we'll talk to you guys soon. And Tom, thanks again for hopping on.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, guys. See you.